How Napoleon won a war without firing a shot. October 20th, 1805. An Austrian general walks out of the fortress city of Ulm carrying a white flag. Behind him, 30,000 Austrian soldiers lay down their weapons without firing a single shot. In just 19 days, Napoleon Bonaparte had destroyed an entire enemy army through nothing but pure strategic genius. This is the story of how the greatest military mind in history won a complete victory without fighting a single major battle. Welcome back to Chapters in History, where we explore the moments when brilliant strategy changed everything. I'm your host, and today we're diving into Napoleon's Ulm campaign, the masterpiece of military maneuvering that proved battles aren't always won with bullets. If you're fascinated by strategic brilliance and tactical genius, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we're bringing you the most incredible stories of military innovation every single week. Chapter 1. The Impossible Coalition. By 1805, Napoleon had already conquered most of Europe, but his enemies weren't giving up. Austria, Russia, and Britain had formed the Third Coalition, a massive alliance designed to crush the French Empire once and for all. Russian armies under General Kutuzov would march west to join him, creating a combined force of over 150,000 soldiers. Once united, this massive army would advance on France, while British forces threatened from the sea. Napoleon would be surrounded, outnumbered, and forced to fight a defensive war on multiple fronts, exactly the kind of situation that had destroyed previous French leaders. There was just one problem with this brilliant plan. They were dealing with Napoleon Bonaparte. While the Austrians were congratulating themselves on their strategy, Napoleon was studying maps in his headquarters at Boulogne. He saw what his enemies couldn't, that their plan contained a fatal flaw. By advancing separately, Mack and Kutuzov had given him the opportunity to destroy them one at a time. But Napoleon's solution wouldn't involve massive battles or frontal assaults. Instead, he was about to demonstrate that the greatest victories come not from fighting harder, but from thinking smarter. Chapter 2. The Lightning March. On August 27, 1805, Napoleon issued orders that would change military history. The Grande Armée, 200,000 of the best trained soldiers in Europe, began moving east from their camps along the English Channel. But this wasn't just a march, it was a masterpiece of logistics and deception. Napoleon divided his army into 7 separate corps, each moving along different routes toward the Rhine River. To outside observers, it looked like the French were scattering the forces, exactly what you shouldn't do when facing a superior enemy. But Napoleon had calculated every movement with mathematical precision. While Austrian spies reported French corps moving in different directions, they missed the bigger picture. All 7 corps were converging on a single point: the Black Forest region of southern Germany. Napoleon was concentrating his entire army exactly where the Austrians least expected it. The speed was unprecedented. French soldiers covered 15 to 20 miles per day, day after day, with a precision that amazed even veteran campaigners. Supply wagons moved in perfect coordination. Engineers built bridges while the army was still marching. Every detail had been planned months in advance. Meanwhile, General Mack sat in Ulm, confident that the French were still hundreds of miles away. Austrian reconnaissance reported French movements, but the reports were so scattered and contradictory that Mack dismissed them as minor diversions. By September 25th, Napoleon had achieved the impossible. He had moved 200,000 men across half of Europe without the enemy realizing what was happening. The Grande Armée was now positioned on the Austrian flank, ready to execute the most brilliant strategic maneuver in military history. Chapter 3. The Perfect Trap. On October 7th, General Mack received reports that made his blood run cold. French armies weren't approaching from the west as expected. They were already behind him, cutting off his supply lines and escape routes to Vienna. Napoleon had executed what military historians call the strategy of the central position to perfection. Instead of attacking Mack's strong defensive position at Ulm head-on, he had simply gone around it. The French army was now between the Austrian forces and their Russian allies, making it impossible for the two armies to unite. But Napoleon's genius went beyond simple maneuvering. He had positioned his corps with surgical precision, creating multiple layers of encirclement. Even if Mack tried to break out in any direction, he would run into fresh French forces ready to block his escape. The psychological impact was devastating. Austrian officers who had been confident of victory just days earlier now found themselves trapped in an impossible situation. Supply convoys couldn't get through. Communications with Vienna were cut. Morale began to collapse as soldiers realized they were completely surrounded. Mack tried desperate measures to break free. He sent cavalry probes in every direction, looking for gaps in the French encirclement. Every probe was repulsed. He attempted to force march his army toward the Danube, hoping to cross before the French could react. Napoleon had anticipated this move and positioned troops to block every river crossing. Most remarkably, Napoleon achieved this complete encirclement while barely fighting any battles at all. Small skirmishes, yes. A few cavalry clashes, certainly. But no major engagements where thousands of men died in frontal assaults. The French had won through superior positioning, not superior firepower. Chapter 4. The Surrender. By October 15th, the situation in Ulm had become hopeless. The Austrian army was completely cut off, running low on supplies and facing the prospect of starvation. Mack's officers were openly discussing surrender. But Napoleon wasn't finished demonstrating his strategic mastery. He began tightening the noose with mathematical precision, moving his corps closer to Ulm while maintaining perfect coordination. Every Austrian attempt to break out was anticipated and countered before it could develop. The French didn't need to storm the city, they just had to wait. Cut off from supplies and reinforcements, the Austrian army was slowly dying. Soldiers began deserting in large numbers. Officers started secret negotiations with French commanders. On October 17th, Mack finally accepted reality. He sent envoys to Napoleon requesting terms for surrender. The French emperor's response was typically generous and victory. He would accept the surrender of the entire Austrian army, but would treat the officers with honor and allow the common soldiers to return home. 3 days later, on October 20th, 1805, one of the most extraordinary scenes in military history unfolded. The gates of Ulm opened, and 30,000 Austrian soldiers marched out in formation, stacked their weapons, and surrendered to an army that had barely fired a shot in anger. Napoleon himself received the surrender, treating the defeated Austrian officers with the courtesy due to brave soldiers who had been outmaneuvered rather than outfought. General Mack, his career destroyed but his honor intact, formally handed over his sword to the man who had just rewritten the rules of warfare. Chapter 5. The Strategic Masterstroke. The Ulm campaign wasn't just a victory, it was a demonstration of strategic thinking so advanced that military academies still study it today. Napoleon had achieved something that seemed impossible, the complete destruction of an enemy army without fighting a major battle. The numbers tell the story. In 19 days, Napoleon had captured 30,000 prisoners, 65 artillery pieces, and 40 battle standards, while losing fewer than 2,000 men himself. He had eliminated an entire Austrian army and opened the road to Vienna, all through superior maneuvering. But the real genius lay in Napoleon's understanding of time and space. While his enemies thought in terms of battles and frontal confrontations, he thought in terms of positioning and psychology. He knew that an army cut off from supplies and reinforcements would eventually have to surrender, regardless of how brave its soldiers were. The campaign also demonstrated Napoleon's mastery of what we now call operational art, the level of warfare between tactics and grand strategy. He coordinated multiple corps across hundreds of miles, with a precision that wouldn't be matched until the age of radio communications. The psychological impact extended far beyond the battlefield. Word of Ulm spread across Europe like wildfire, establishing Napoleon's reputation as a military genius who could win wars without fighting them. Future enemies would hesitate to face an opponent who could make entire armies disappear through pure strategic brilliance. Chapter 6. The Lasting Legacy. The Ulm campaign revolutionized military thinking and established principles that remain relevant today. Napoleon proved that superior strategy could overcome superior numbers, that mobility could triumph over static defense, and that the greatest victories come from outthinking rather than outfighting your enemy. Military theorists like Karl von Clausewitz would later analyze Ulm as the perfect example of achieving decisive results through maneuver rather than attrition. The campaign demonstrated that wars could be won through superior logistics, coordination, and strategic positioning. The influence extended beyond military circles. Ulm showed that in any competitive environment, whether warfare, business, or politics, the greatest advantages come from seeing possibilities that others miss and acting on them with perfect timing and execution. Modern military doctrine still emphasizes the principles Napoleon demonstrated at Ulm: the importance of speed, the power of surprise, and the devastating effectiveness of attacking an enemy's weaknesses rather than their strengths. Perhaps most importantly, Ulm proved that the greatest weapon any commander can possess isn't superior firepower or numbers, it's superior thinking. Napoleon won his greatest bloodless victory, not because he had better soldiers or equipment, but because he had a better understanding of how to use time, space, and human psychology to achieve his objectives.
Final chapter: Victory.
Napoleon's victory at Ulm proved that sometimes the most devastating defeats come not from the battles you fight, but from the battles you never have to fight at all. Through pure strategic genius, the French emperor achieved total victory while barely firing a shot, a masterpiece of military thinking that changed warfare forever. What impressed you most about Napoleon's strategy? The lightning-fast march, the perfect encirclement, or the psychological warfare? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this incredible story of strategic brilliance. For more tales of military genius and tactical innovation from history's greatest commanders, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Until next time, keep exploring the minds that changed the world through pure strategic thinking.